Jai Jinendra. Welcome to Adults Class 2, Practical Applications of Jainism. Let's start with the Nokar Mantra. Namo Arihantana, Namo Siddhana, Namo Ayaryana, Namo Urajayanam, Namo Vaisavasarmana, Yeso Panchanamukkaro Savapava Panasano Mangalancha Sarvasim Paramam Mangalam. We left off last time avoiding doing paperwork with the question of how to instill good habits into our children. Sometimes they have to do things they don't want to do and refuse to understand why, because they don't think it's in their self-interest. And often they're right. The things they have to do are not in their short-term self-interest, but we know that they are in their long-term self-interest. So usually the result is the most common cause of violence in our life. Take a moment to think about your life and what the causes of violence are in your life. Does anybody have a different number one? It's the number one cause of violence in my life. Does anybody have a different number one? Perhaps you don't have kids or you have a violent job or something like that, but I'd wager to say that for most of us, the number one cause of hinsa in our life is our children. So not only will our non-spiritual life benefit by talking to our kids in a way that they'll understand.
So it's like verbal or non-verbal violence.
Sure, certainly.
Not just action.
Does verbal violence count as hinsa?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Does mental violence count as hinsa? Yeah. So those count as hinsa in addition to physical violence. And most of us don't lead a life where we're physically violent every day. So this verbal and mental violence now becomes our number one cause of hinsa in our life. So not only will our non-spiritual life benefit by talking to kids in a way that they'll understand, but our spiritual life will benefit as well because that's practicing samvar, right? Who remembers what samvar is?
The influx of karma.
That's right. So if we stop fighting with our kids, we'll reduce the number one cause of karma being attached to our soul. Only good can come from eliminating the number one cause of violence in our lives. Hi, come on in.
Sorry.
No problem. How are you doing?
Good, are you?
Great to see you.
They're going to love it when I tell them what my subject was for class today.
What's your name?
Dimple?
Dimple. Great to meet you. I'm
Nice to meet
Timur.
you. Hi.
Dimple, what's the number one cause of violence in your life?
Maybe walking?
Walking, right? So you
Right.
step on like little animals, things like that.
Mhm.
Do you think that those animals are capable of... Do you have kids?
No.
No kids. Yeah, so that might be the number one cause of violence in your life. The number of cause of violence in my life is fighting with my children. So, unfortunately, we're going to talk about that. But hopefully you can get something out of this discussion. So, I'd like to start by sharing what has worked for our family. But, of course, all kids are different. And I, of course, know that too well. What works for one kid might not work for other kids. What works for girls might not work for boys. What works for introverts might not work for extroverts. So I want to hear from you about what works for your kids. And what works for older kids might not work for younger kids. So I'd like to hear from you about how to reduce the violence in our life. And we can broaden it to not even if you don't have kids, about the relationships in your life, right? Perhaps if you have a significant other or a spouse, fighting with them is the number one cause of violence in your life. So while you think about that, I'll tell you about perhaps something that we've experienced this morning. That is, the kids don't want to come to Patsala, right? So it's not in their short-term self-interest. They don't think it's in their short-term self-interest. So they fight with us, and they don't want to come. So what works for my kids? What works for my kids is three things. The first thing is that telling them they will have a choice later, but they don't have a choice now. So they'll have a choice to not come. In fact, as kids get older, they don't come. Class 8 has less than 20 students in it, and class 1 through 3 has over 50 students in them, right? So they drop off as they get older, even from coming to Patsala. And so they will have a choice. So I tell them that. You don't have a choice now, but you're going to have a choice. And that works for a lot of things. When they're going to have to make a choice whether to eat meat or not. They don't have a choice now, but they'll have a choice later. I can't control their life later, right? They'll have a choice whether they have a relationship with their sibling or not. You know, one sibling might hate the other one. Well, you got to get along together now, but pretty soon you're going to have a choice whether you want this person in your life. And I hope that you want that person in your life, but you may not. They'll have a choice whether they have a relationship with us later on. And so in the same way, they'll have a choice whether they come to the temple. The second thing I try to do is I try to tell them, make a friend at the temple. If you make a friend at the temple, you'll come in, you'll look forward to it, you'll talk and you'll have a good time, and it can be a separate group of friends than you have at school and a separate group of friends than you have as your family. And so I try to encourage that. That's a little bit harder. Maybe your kids are better at making friends than my kids.
Struggling on the same boat.
And the third thing is I try to tell them is, just like I tell you guys, let's say you don't believe you're a soul. You don't believe there's anything that happens when you die. If you implement the principles of Jainism in your life, you'll increase the quality of your life. And I tell them how Jainism has increased the quality of my life. And I hope that if they learn it, they can take things away that will increase the quality of their life. If they think it's their only life, well, they'll still be able to have a better life by incorporating Jain principles into those. So does anybody else have any tips and tricks of how to get their kids to come to Patsala? Hey, Jai Jinendra.
I think you made a very good point. I think the friends, like Krish and Yash, mainly Krish, is looking forward to go to Patshala just to talk to his friends.
Right.
Right? And then we give them some time after the class so they can hang out.
Great. Love that.
So, yeah.
I'm reached to the point later part.
Yeah.
They now have a choice not to come.
Oh, yeah?
And they do exercise that time
Yeah.
to time.
They're like, I'm too busy, or I can't do it right now.
Yeah. What has worked in the past is exploiting anything that they found good in the last class, that you talk through that throughout the weeks or whatever. Whenever the opportunity comes, you exploit that a lot. And they will find something else. So that may have worked for one kid or two maybe,
Right.
but not all kids.
Sometimes making like choices with them, right? Like agree on them. Okay, like today, Kevin didn't want to come to the Patshala. And then he's like, okay, how about we won't stay for lunch, but we go to the Patshala. He's like, I don't want to do language class either. I'm like, no, you have to do language class. You have to meet them somewhere in the middle. I'm like, okay, so we agreed on we won't stay for lunch. So that's our sacrifice, which is okay, not a big deal. As long as they attend the class, that's the main goal here. So.
Right. Oh, that's good. We have a deal with learning chores too. It's the kids not in their short-term self-interest to learn chores. It's in their short-term self-interest to have you do everything, right? But it's not in their long-term interest to learn chores. What we do is we tell them that, well, when you go to college, you're going to have to learn how to do your laundry. I can't do your laundry. And when you go to college, you're going to have to learn how to do all these things. And so I blame everything on college. And that does a couple of things. That makes them assume they are going to go to college. And so, and that gets them thinking about, what's life going to be like when I'm out of the house and when I'm on my own and things like that. And so, like, I literally blame everything on college. You want a pet? I can't control you when you're in college. We can't have a pet now, but if you get a dog when you're in college, I can't do anything about it. So then they look forward to that, right? So if you want to, why do I have to learn how to cook? Well, because you're going to be on your own in college. You know, I didn't tell them about a meal plan or anything like that. When you're on your own in college, you're going to have to be able to cook.
Yeah.
You're going to have to be able to do your laundry. You're going to have to be able to do the dishes, right? Well, why can't I learn it before I go? Because you got so much to learn before you go. You got to learn that now, and then we're going to learn other things before you go to college. That has worked with my children about learning chores. Tell me how you have reduced the violence in your life by getting your kids to learn chores.
This isn't a reduction of violence, but so we have our kids make their own lunch, right? And they're like, none of my friends have to make their lunch. Their mom makes it, or whatever, right? Like, why do I have to wake up early and make my lunch?
Right.
So, I mean, we just make them do it. But we sort of said, okay, you know, you can kind of pick a reward, which could be, you know, not making your lunch if you do well at school. Like, okay, you got a good grade on your test or whatever, right? Something good that you've done. Then fine, I'll make your lunch tomorrow, right? So that is sort of incentivize them to try harder at school.
That's great.
To get out of doing chores.
Yeah.
But
use chores as a reward system or not doing chores as a reward system. That's great.
We used to, well, my kids are a little older now, but when they were younger, like elementary age, the reward system was the easiest way to get them to do things, because then it wasn't that daily violence of you need to empty this dishwasher, you need to do that. It was just so painful for everybody.
Yeah.
But if we were rewarding them points which were redeemable for game time, like screen time or video game or something, so that worked very, very well. And
That's great.
It might be a boy thing, but they loved earning those points and making them, and then after a few years of that working really well, then we stopped. We just abandoned that, but they still do this. They still do things for us
Right.
when we ask. Like, it's not like a daily battle anymore. Yeah.
And if you've got young kids, the reward system might be stickers and little things like that, or tiny M&Ms.
I think at their age and my older one's age, what we're trying to do is, as I'm sure you guys know, we're trying to establish those habits now, even if it delays our cleanup process. You know, they have that interest because they have their play mop and their play broom and jadu, and so we let them do it to, even though it creates more mess for us later, we're trying to create those fundamentals now so that hopefully when they're older, it'll be ingrained in them.
Yeah. And you make it fun by saying the cleanup song, right? Do you know the cleanup song? She doesn't know.
But how do you keep up all this with the busy schedule for them? Like,
It sounds exhausting.
Yeah, I don't honestly think my kids have any capacity to do like any evening chores. And of course, mornings are busy. They can do their own stuff a little bit. But other than weekend, I don't see on weekdays they have a time to do anything.
What are they busy doing? From the end of
Baseball.
school to bedtime.
Baseball, that takes over like good 3 hours of a day.
Yeah.
And they don't get home till like 5:36. Then they go for baseball. By the time they come home, eat, dinner, shower, homework, go to bed.
Yeah.
So there's a lot going on.
Well, that's a good thing, right? Because you're not having them learn the chores, but it's not causing violence because your schedule is busy enough, right?
Well, it kind of does, because then I get upset because they're like rushing. They'll just throw their bag in the kitchen as soon as they get in, won't put it back, and I'm like, empty your lunch boxes, put your bags up. So these are the small things, right? And I try to tell them, but then I also feel bad that they don't really have that much time to enjoy themselves.
Right.
So I don't know. It goes both ways, right? It does create some violence in a sense.
Yeah, I mean,
Maybe I need to lower my expectations. I don't know. Maybe do something better about it. So it's not like daily thing, right?
yeah, I can't imagine a 3-hour daily commitment after school for my kids, and that they would have time to do anything else. You're right. That's really tough. Does anybody have any help for Poonam?
Well, I mean, but you can squeeze in the short things like empty the dishwasher. That's like 7 minutes.
I mean, they do
like,
on the weekends and stuff. They do
Yeah,
it. When the days are off, they'll do it. They won't say no. They'll do stuff like that. But it's just, I can't make it a habit. That's my problem.
It'll take a kid 20 minutes to empty the dishwasher, not 7.
Yeah.
After
Or
all the
2 hours.
complaining and stuff, it might take an hour.
You may not like the way they empty it and put the dishes away either.
That's right, and that brings up an important point. We can't criticize it when they do take initiative and do things wrong. You can't be like, well, that's totally wrong. You have to praise them, and you have to put whatever you have to say down. You have to not speak it because they did make an effort and they did.
Also, would you give them a choice of doing their favorite chores only, or would you make them do the chores they hate?
Yeah, I mean, should they only do the things that they like? No, I don't think so. I think you have to try to work with them to do the things that they need to know how to do, not just the things that they like to do.
Kids are also incentivized by screen time, so like we had the same thing where it's like a constant battle for everything we were trying to do. So now it's just like, okay, you guys are that's what your incentive is. You want to do that? It's like, is your lunch made? Is your snack in your backpack? Is your Chromebook charging? Like, go
Yes.
through the list. You have whatever time it takes you to do that, and then you will get that. Otherwise, we're not having this battle constantly every day. It was too much.
Well, we got to talk about it. We got to talk about the phone, okay? So now the only thing I offer my kids with respect to the phone is the truth, all right? The truth is that the phones seem to be a necessary evil that are more evil than necessary. The vast majority of people online want to hurt you. The phone is trying to enslave you. So I tried to convince them of that, of the truth. The phone is trying to enslave you. It has enslaved many people. Look at your friends who have a phone. It is in the process of enslaving them. And I tried to get them to see that. And the other thing that has worked for us is to have a definite date. They know when they're getting a phone. And they know that I keep my promises. So I have promised it to them, and so they're not worried about it. They have a date, just like, they know they can get a pet in college. They have a date in mind when they can get a pet. It might be a long time from now, but there's a date, and they know that their life is going to change. So they know that they're going to get a phone on a definite date, and I'm going to keep my promise. And I have to do all I can to teach them about the phone before they get it. Tell me about your experience with kids and the phones.
In my kids' school, in the middle school, they don't allow the phone. Like, you have to keep it in your locker. So I'm like, I'm not giving you a phone to keep it in your locker the whole day. Like, what's the point, right?
Right.
So that has worked. I think we found a few of our friends don't have a phone, and we're like, they're not on the phone. Their parents also deem it not necessary.
That's great. That's
So,
great that you
know,
have that
don't-
kind of help.
You don't also need it, right?
That's
And I mean, the other thing, I'm like, I'm not paying for your phone. You want a phone? Find some money and pay for it.
Perfect. Perfect. And that leads to a kind of a greater thing that has worked for my kids is they get money and they have money. So then I blame everything on if they want it, they can buy it with their money, right? So if you want that $60 thing, a $60 purse, you buy it with your money, you save up for it, you buy it. And so I make sure that the amount of money I give them is, roughly they save about 3 months and they can get something nice, or roughly they want something super nice, they save 6 months to 1 year. Then they can get something nice. So I guess I'll have to increase it as they get older, as their tastes get more expensive. And so that's what's worked for us, and it seems to be working for you too.
So money reward for the chores?
No, we've talked about that earlier. We don't give money for chores because they have to do that.
Okay.
We don't want to incentivize doing something they have to do because they don't get money for it when they grow up anyway, right? So everybody can differ, but our opinion is that they just get money just for existing, just like an income, right? It's just they get the money regardless, whether they're good behavior, bad behavior,
That's what they
anything.
used to call it in.
But it's like an amount where they have to save to get something that they want.
So I have a unique problem. My kids have saved like $600-700 in their savings account, and then they keep reminding me, "Oh well, I'll buy with my money." I said, no, you have to save for your college. So then they said, then what's the point of saving? Because I cannot, because then they will always, not blackmail, but they'll always fall back on that saying, well, I have money in my account and I like this. Say, he comes up to me and says, I want to buy a 3D printer and it costs $550.
Right.
I said, well, what's the need? So you need to, just because a couple of your friends have it and they can print some cool stuff, it doesn't really translate for us to buy that, right? You can go to a library, pay them, say, $5 and get the same thing printed.
Mhm.
Why do you need something at home?
Right.
So that's the constant challenge, especially with the middle schooler, where he knows and he keeps checking his account.
Yeah.
He knows that he has this much money because whatever he gets as part of rewards or anything, that goes into his account.
Mhm.
So he knows that I have so much money in my bank, so why can't I use it? So
Right. I will tell you what has worked for me. And maybe that hasn't worked for my wife. Is that if it's their money, they can use it. If I was in your shoes, I would say, you're right, it's your money. You saved $600. If you want to spend $550 on a 3D printer, go ahead. I won't ask them why they need it. I won't ask them if they think it's a good idea or if it's a mess. She gets upset if they make a poor purchasing decision. But I want them to learn that lesson, to learn to know what it's like to light $500 on fire. That's the whole purpose I give them the money. So maybe that's not right for you and your family, but I'm telling you that's what I would do. I don't like to question their purchases. I'm with your child on this one. If you saved it, then you can spend it on whatever you want. If you want to spend, $100 on Robux, this digital currency for a video game, go ahead. I'll type it in for you and I'll deduct it from your account. And that, for me personally, it's like, okay, now you're learning whatever lesson, good, bad, whatever. You're learning that it's really your money. I'm not going to gatekeep you from your money, things like that. But I'm sure there are other differing opinions that they don't want their child to light money on fire. Yeah.
So Roblox, V-Bucks, we just had the conversation while driving. Both of them are like, we have our Thanksgiving list prepared. And the younger one goes, I want V-Bucks. And immediately the older one was like, that's a waste of money. I really regret right now.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So it kind of worked out.
Yeah.
But yeah, I kind of agree, go with the kids' choices. But I do interfere a little bit in that I'm like, okay, it's 600. Have the liberty to spend a certain percentage, not all of it or something.
Oh.
And then also have them gotten investing into stocks and stuff too. So they do like that and they enjoy that as well.
You're gonna get more bang from the buck letting them spend that money and make the decisions. Like if he has $600 and that printer's $550, then he realizes that, wait a second, what am I not gonna be able to buy by getting that? You're probably gonna get more bang for the buck than saving for college. College is a lost cause. Like I think they're gonna learn more from making their own choices, like you were saying.
And
but
now at this age, rather than 10 years down the road.
Also, there are the 1/3
No, it's gonna
right?
force them to
Whatever
make
you have
decisions.
saved, 1/3 you save, 1/3 you spend, and 1/3 you donate. So you can modify accordingly, right? Like certain percentage you can donate out of the money you save. Certain percent you can save or spend on whatever you want to spend on. Then you just
Specifically
let
with
them
the
do it.
printer, you could, because like buying the wire or whatever, that also costs money after, right? It's not just the printer. Right?
Yeah, the material cost.
Yeah.
So then you could remind them that like, okay, you got $50. Is not going to be enough for you to actually make anything out of it after, right?
Correct.
It's amazing once they have to make decisions for their own little savings and how much they spend. I have 2 kids and they'll be debating like, oh, that upgrade on the app is $10.99, and they have a long discussion on whether it's worth it or not for that $10.99. The guy's got $600, but they're like, and one kid is like, no way, wait till it's on sale, wait till it's like really they make some pretty interesting decisions.
And I've told my kids, I've told them the label that economists put on it, opportunity cost, right? They know the phrase opportunity cost. They are intimately aware of, well, if I buy this, then I can't buy that other thing, or if something else comes along that I want to buy, then I won't be able to buy that if I make this big purchase. And so it may be a good expensive vocabulary lesson.
Mm-hmm. I wanted to go to the phone thing you mentioned earlier. So you guys are talking about when to give the kids a phone, but at some point they're going to need it because they communicate by text to coordinate with their friends, school, work, getting together. But the thing that bugs us is all the kids get together and they're on their phone, like this thing. Yeah. So we've told them from the beginning. We were at a dinner with people. You are not going to pull the phone out. It doesn't matter what all the other kids are doing. And so they literally, you know, like 2 kids are pulling the phone out. Our kids can't do it. And I'm like, why don't you guys just talk instead, you know? And then some of the kids will come to our house to play. And they'll play a little bit. They're having some snack and people pull out their phone to start doing it. And I literally go to these other neighborhood kids and be like, why don't you just put that away and just chat while you're eating instead? And so they're like, yes, sir. You know, like, I mean, they accept it, right? But it's like, you also got to, you know, get that habit in place that the phone is for communication, but not for mindless, you know, zone out, you know?
Right. So, what does the internet have to say about how to get kids to do things they don't want to do? Number 1, model positive behavior. Do it yourself. They'll look at you and look at what you're doing and share your experience of doing it yourself, like how Jainism has helped your life. Number 2, make it a routine. Set up a habit. As kids get used to a routine, it'll be easier and easier to convince them to do things they don't want to do. Number 3, you focus on the process, not on the outcomes. You celebrate their wins along the way. Even if the outcome is not what you expected, you celebrate them trying and doing the work. Number 4, incorporate fun and choice, which we talked about. Number 5, set realistic goals, which we always talk about. That's the R and SMART goals. 6, positive reinforcement. We talked about the reward system. 7, decision-making skills, which we talked about, letting them decide what to do with their own money or decide what to do as far as a goal. You give them a goal and they can decide any way they want to do it. Number 8, be patient and supportive. You can't criticize them when they finally do something and do it wrong. At least they are trying to do it. And number 9, create a supportive environment. So everything we talked about is the right thing to do according to the internet. Questions or comments? Any questions or comments from our online friends? I want to make sure that we hear from you.
No.
Well,
First of all very good discussion. I'm listening in.
Sure.
But yeah, I like to have in, but I think this is a good discussion. This is my first time I think usually I'm in the class.
Right.
Kind of getting a taste of what it is when you're virtual.
How is it?
It's good. It's perfect actually. I can make some notes, which I always forget to bring my notebook when I'm in class.
Great. So now, if the number 1 cause of violence in life is our children, well, what might be the number 2? It's probably fighting with our spouse or significant other, right? How can we eliminate that from our life?
You know, what I've done, and I don't know if this has been successful, but saying yes to everything.
Yes, saying yes might be a good way to satisfy her short-term interest, but it won't be a good way to keep the relationship alive long-term. So, one thing that's important about eliminating the violence from our relationship with our spouse or significant other is learning how to disagree. And it's different for each couple, okay? Sometimes people spend some time apart. Sometimes one person has to talk through it. Sometimes one person is like, I can't even listen to you anymore. I got to, go take a walk, go take a drive. But you have to understand how you disagree with each other. And, you're lucky if you disagree the same way in the same style with each other. But usually you don't. But you have to understand how that person has a disagreement, and you have to be able to talk through that. So I encourage you, if you don't know, if you haven't spent any time thinking about it, think about how your partner works through problems and see if that's the way you do it. And if not, then try to give them space to do what they need to do and ask for the space to do the things that you need to do. And I know that's all very abstract, but it's so different. Each couple is so different. But learning how to talk to each other and learning how to disagree, and that you can come out on the other side stronger, whether it's agreeing to disagree, having some kind of compromise, saying, well, let me have this and I'll let you have that. Something like that might work for you. And depending on the issue, a combination of those things could work for you. How else can
I
we...
just wanted to say I'm here home with my daughter. So she's listening. She's homesick today. And we're both enjoying this conversation very much.
Oh, great. Fantastic.
Yeah.
I'm sure
she knows exactly what we're trying to do here.
How else can you reduce the mental and verbal violence in your house by decreasing the temperature of your relationships?
So I think one of the things that I need to more work on is setting expectations beforehand, be with your kids or be with your spouse, like letting them know what you are trying to get out of it and why.
Right.
So if they understand the reasoning behind it, they might follow it better way. And I'm really bad at it because I just have very high expectations. I'm like, okay, you should have done this, you should have done, but
right.
Like, you know, now that we had a couple of classes about lowering your expectation, I realized afterwards, like, oh, they didn't even know what I was thinking. How would they do it? They're just doing what they thought was best. So I think I need to work more on being, you know, keep being upfront and making sure they understand what my expectations are.
Right. Yeah. Does anybody remember what we called that? Yeah, we called it a covert contract. So I'm at home, I'm sitting on the couch. My wife comes in, you know, she's had a long day, and she sees like the dirty dishes in the dishwasher. And she's like, oh, you didn't take care of it. And I was like, was I supposed to take care of it? And she said, well, if I had the time, I would have taken care of it. And I was like, I didn't know I was supposed to take care of it. And so that is a covert contract, right? And then she's like, well, obviously didn't say it. She's thinking it. I'm putting more work in this relationship than you are because that would have occurred to me. That would have never occurred to you. But that is what we call a classic covert contract, where I made a deal with you and I didn't tell you about it. I made a deal with you in my head. And the deal was, if you have the time and you see the dirty dishes, you're supposed to take care of it.
I agree.
Exactly.
Most of the husbands don't
In
think
case
of that.
it wasn't clear, a covert contract is bad.
Bad. One of those implied contracts.
You
doesn't
never
stand
want,
up in court.
you never want to have any covert contracts in your life. That's exactly what we're talking about, right? And so once you realize that this might be the cause of your problems, then you can start to work on it. And it helps to put a name on it. Because when we give things a name, we get power over them.
Once you've been married long enough, then the people realize that no one's going to assume that responsibility. So then they start becoming more explicit. I'm out all day. You're going to cook for the kids, and you're going to clean up for the kids, then you're going to put everything away, and then I'll come back home, right? And they're like, yeah, thank you for outlining it. You know,
Right. You know, one other thing they say in the married couple, until your wife does not sit down, a husband cannot sit down because there is always something to do.
Right, but we each have our own life, right? We always have to take care of what we need to take care of for ourselves. I'm not a mind reader, my wife is not a mind reader, a husband is not a mind reader. We want all these supposed contracts that we have to be overt, not covert. Questions or comments about any of that?
I do think a lot of time we tend to take our fights with our spouses very personal too, right? You know, that there's always some underlying, like you said, you know, that you had a long, hard day at work, and so there's some underlying, or for you, you know, there's always some personal attack that we may feel that our spouse is levying when a lot of times it is just an honest inquiry of why haven't you done the dishes? But then you think like, well, I've had a hard day, or I've been, you know, you take your own internal battle with it. And I think that's also hard, is not taking things personally, but just understanding that it's a general inquiry.
Right. Yeah, how to speak to each other without getting into an argument. How to have hard conversations, right?
Yeah.
How and when to do those things, right? And that's what, the book is. That's what we talk about. Anger, ego, deceit, greed, meditation, mindfulness. That's all in here, right? Other questions or comments?
I'll say, Timur, just personally, I think you what you were saying earlier definitely hits a lot where it's, how you guys disagree is also important. I think my wife and I are about to have our 10-year, and I think we both have realized we both handle things differently. I want to talk immediately and dissect the conversation, whereas she needs, like you were saying, space. She wants to kind of be isolated a little bit. So then I can kind of make things worse by trying to talk it out, whereas I need to give her that space. I think that's an important aspect of it, is how the other person internalizes it, so that you are understanding of what they need to do to process it.
Right. And in addition, we don't always remember, but our kids are people too. And they have their own way of doing things, they have their own way of arguing, and we have less control over that than we might think. And so as my kids are getting older, I have to meet them where they are now. I have to start transitioning to treat them like adults now. And so those same things will apply about how to disagree with somebody, how to have a hard conversation. And I have to meet them in the middle more, because now sometimes they're right more than I'm right. Or now sometimes they know what's best for them more than I know what's best for them. And that'll get, that seesaw will get closer and closer to balanced until we have an adult relationship, which, some of us have a hard time letting go, but that's where we're going to be. And remember, if you have a hard time thinking about that, remember, they're going to have to decide whether they want a relationship with you at some point. Mm-hmm. And I pray that the answer is yes for everybody here, but sometimes, you have to be aware that the answer might be no if you've been a very unforgiving parent.
With the disagreements with the spouse also, a lot of times some of the issues that are the most make you the most angry are ones that don't have a right or wrong answer. So how to deal with the kids' complex problem, how to deal with this problematic relative, and I was brought up this way, you were brought up that way. See, there's no right or wrong answer, and so sometimes it's okay to be like, listen, I agreed. I mean, let's agree to disagree, and let's bring it up later. If it starts getting too heated up, that we're not going to have the same eye to eye on this, how to treat this,
right,
or resolve the situation. But let's just take a break. So we do that all the time. Let's just take a break and talk about it later. And usually later, you have time to think it through, and then you can have a little bit better conversation about it.
Right.
Yeah, that works in our case. Every once in a while, in the evenings, we go out for a walk. So it's you give space, time, and then it's the right time to bring up certain things, just if you want to clear yourself or have additional conversation.
Yeah.
Or just clarify what was going on at the time, and then just leave it, forget it, and move on.
Because when you're outside, you don't feel comfortable yelling at your spouse. So then you're like, I'm safe here.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because I tell people that all the time, especially my kids. There's a right time for everything. Is the right time to be bringing up this problem while I'm working on your other problem? No, right? If somebody's helping you, shut up and let them help you, right? Don't try to interfere with what they're doing to try to help you, right? And so that's true with our conversations too, right? There's a right time to bring up everything, and oftentimes it's not right before bed, you gotta just eat it until tomorrow when it's the right time to bring it up. And so that will help. And we know that when we want to get things from people, I should wait until Dad's in a good mood before I ask him for this. But somehow we forget about all that with our spouse. We think the right time is now, It's probably not now. Other questions or comments?
I guess a lot of you here have middle schooler or older kids. How do you deal with the attitude problem that comes in when they're preteen, teenage?
Okay. Any help from those with older kids?
Good cop, bad cop.
Right.
One parent, and you got to figure out who's the good cop and bad cop beforehand.
It can change.
But,
It can change too. over
Because then
time.
it's not two people yelling at the kid. It's one person being a little bit tougher and one person being, look, I know where you're coming from, but this is what Dad's trying to say, and it's kind of like, you got 2 against 1, and I don't know, that helps us a lot.
One person is the confidant and
Yes.
will lend an ear,
Yeah.
and another person just lays down reality. And
But we're both dealing with the attitude problem, but one's like your friend and one's like angry at it, and then it kind of works out okay.
I just don't understand what goes on with them. They don't want to explain themselves.
Yeah.
Right.
Like just because I wanted to do that way, but there is no reasoning, like no explanation, and kind of drives me nuts.
One thing that may help you is that most of us don't lead examined lives. Most of us don't know why we do the things we do because we're driven by emotion. And we did things while we were feeling a particular way, and now we can't explain it because we're not in that emotional state. So it is very common to have a kid tell you, I don't know why, and for that to be the truth. What I don't want you to do is think that that's a lie and they're trying to cover it up. They actually do not know why they do the things they do.
Well, I would rather take that answer. Our answers are like, I don't want to talk about it. And that's just wrong. I'm like,
Right.
It's okay. If you made a mistake, learn to apologize. If you were in a bad emotion mood, just tell us like, oh, you shouldn't have done it. But I guess we are coming up probably in a bad way, right? Oh, you were at fault and admit it in a way.
They don't want to because it feels bad. Not only did it feel bad to do the action, but it feels bad to apologize, and it feels bad to admit that they made a mistake, and they can't verbalize that to you. They don't know why. They just have the feeling like, I can't tell her why. I can't tell her I'm sorry. And I don't know why. But why is because it feels bad to do. But that doesn't make it any less annoying or any less, But hopefully it'll
Okay.
right. Anybody else have some advice for Poonam? How to deal with the talking back and the inability to explain themselves and the bad behavior and the disrespect?
I think sometimes pick your fight depending on what it is. If it's studies, grade related, yeah, maybe you can push a little bit. If it's just, hey, I want to do my homework 2 hours later, I'm just tired, just let them be the way they are. I think they'll appreciate once or a couple of times, and then slowly they'll start seeing the friend in you to open up more or say something. But same thing applies, right? Just give them space.
When somebody does something like disrespectful or like really wrong, our first focus is we got to tell this kid that it's unacceptable, which is like anger, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Right.
both of us are like, "Arr." So that's why we'll usually be like, I'm the guy who's going to show why this is unacceptable, and then the kid's going to shut down and not talk and say it's nothing and whatever, and then the other parent will be like, okay, let's just calm it down. Do you know why Dad thinks this is unacceptable? So then it's like that confidant, but it's like now the other parent is trying to ask the kid, why is that guy so mad right now? Maybe talk it through, and then they're okay talking to the quiet parent, and then we're dissecting this problem, but just because but you're still telling him it's unacceptable, but now you're discussing why is it unacceptable rather than why did you do it, apologize, whatever, so.
What has worked for us, and may not work for boys, is talking about our emotions. That is, the reason that it's disrespectful is this, and that makes me feel this way, and how would you like it if you were in my shoes and somebody made you feel this way, and this is what I'm trying to accomplish by telling you to do these things and you're talking back. It might not work for middle school boys.
Thank you.
And so if they understand that, and we have kind of drilled that incessantly, kind of analyzing the emotional complexity of all the situations, And now they just get tired of it. They're just like, oh, we got to talk about this now. And now they don't want to screw up because they know we have to talk about it now. Like, because I'm not going to let it go. I'm like, we're going to have a 30-minute conversation about your 5-minute blow up. Yes, we're doing this. And now if they're going to keep on, we're going to keep on. And it's exhausting. But that's what that has deterred them from acting out so much, is that they know we're going to have to talk about it, and we're going to have to get all the stakeholders involved and have a family meeting and discuss why we see it's as ridiculous as it sounds. But
the kid talks back to you and they're like, Mom, don't tell Dad, please.
She's very aware. Sometimes she'll come talk to me and, no, I'm still mad at him. Okay.
Anything else before we wrap it up? Thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate that. I only have an hour with you. I wish I could have more time. But the goal of this class has always been how to apply Jane principles to your life in order to increase the quality of your life. And this is the only time I get with you, so I don't take it for granted. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I have a quick